Welcome to our channel, all friends. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to stay update for new videos. Thanks. Let's start new video. My name is Sabiha, and today I am going to tell you a true story that happened to me. At that time, I was about 8 or 9 years old and a student in the 3rd grade. I clearly remember that my father was unemployed at the time, though I didn't know the exact reason. Financially, things were very tough for us because of the unemployment. My father was very worried, but by the grace of Allah, my mother was blessed with a child for the 2nd time. I was the firstborn, and for 7 years after me, my mother couldn't have another child. Now, with the news of a new baby coming, both my parents were worried about how they would manage the hospital expenses. At that time, my grandmother suggested that they send me to her house. So my father immediately went to the railway station to buy the ticket. I saw my mother packing clothes into a suitcase, and I started crying. I insisted that I wanted to go to my grandmother's house as well. Then, my grandmother told my father, Manichi, take Sabiha with you. She can meet her aunt and grandmother, and you can bring her back later. My grandmother also gave my father the money for my ticket. We were to travel from Faisalabad to Quetta. At that age, children are usually excited about long journeys, and I was no exception. To cut a long story short, after staying at my grandmother's house in Quetta for 4 days, we had to return to Faisalabad, leaving my mother there as she had to rest. I didn't want to part with my mother, but I had no choice, as my exams were approaching, and I couldn't take many more days off from school. My father had some work in Sukur, so he bought a ticket from Quetta to Sukur. He went to visit an acquaintance who had political influence to get a recommendation for a job. We stayed in his office from morning till afternoon. When we left, I started feeling hungry. My father stopped at a small hotel and asked the waiter what they had to eat. The waiter listed various dishes. My father, having very little money after paying for the rent, asked how much a plate of chickpeas and 3 naans would cost. The waiter replied that it would be 30 rupees, so we ordered chickpeas and naan. My father and I ate together. When my father went to pay the bill at the counter, the owner said, "Pay 100 rupees. Shocked, my father told him, "We only had 1 plate of chickpeas and 3 naan, and your waiter said it would be 30 rupees. The owner replied, "Sir, you didn't just have simple chickpeas, but chicken chickpeas, cooked with chicken and pure ghee. Therefore, the bill is 100 rupees. The problem was that my father didn't have enough money left. The amount he had was only enough for the train tickets from Sukur to Faisalabad, and now there wasn't enough. My father tried to explain that it was just a simple plate of chickpeas with no chicken. The owner refused to listen. He insisted that it was a dish with chicken in it, and it was cooked in chicken gravy. "You must pay the full amount," he insisted. When the owner saw that my father couldn't pay the 100 rupees, he signaled to his waiter, and soon 2 or 3 staff members gathered around us. They started insulting us, saying things like, "If you didn't have money, why did you come to eat here?" and other hurtful comments. Amidst the noise and chaos, some other customers in the hotel noticed what was happening. Before the situation escalated further or my father's shirt was grabbed, he quickly took out a 100-rupee note from his wallet and paid the bill. Although we were relieved to get away from the humiliation, my father was now left without enough money. This meant that he couldn't afford to buy my half ticket for the train. He didn't want to face embarrassment in front of the ticket checker on the train, so he thought of going to his friend, Rehan, who had a shop nearby. He planned to borrow 100 rupees from him to cover the ticket. We walked from the hotel to the market, but when we reached Rehan's shop, he wasn't there. Instead, his brother was sitting there. My father asked him, "Where is Rehan? I need to meet him." He replied, "Brother, Rehan is sick and is in the hospital. Tell me, what do you need from him?" At that moment, my father, overwhelmed by his pride, couldn't say anything. When you have no money and you're a respectable man in need, it's hard to describe how you feel. It takes a lot of courage to ask anyone for help. There were customers in the shop buying things for themselves, and my father's friend's brother, who was sitting on the counter, appeared to be a very well-mannered and composed man. Seeing his appearance, my father hoped that if he asked for 100 rupees, this man would surely help. So my father quietly explained his situation and asked for the money, saying he would send it back by money order as soon as he got home. The man, who had seemed so polite and respectable, suddenly changed his tone and said harshly, "You might be my brother's friend, but I don't know you. Please leave and don't waste my time." At this, a worker from the shop added, "Who knows where these beggars come from, asking for money under the guise of being friends? People today, strong and healthy, are shamelessly begging." Another person standing nearby also felt the need to comment, adding to the insults. My father, overwhelmed by the embarrassment, couldn't bear it any longer. His face turned pale and tears filled his eyes. The only thing he wanted was to leave, and he grabbed my hand, walking down the stairs of the shop. At that time, there were no mobile phones, and the other customers were staring at us. Two or three women who were shopping in the store also turned to look at us. One of them, who seemed to be middle-aged, and two younger girls wearing fine clothes were watching us. Just as we had descended a few steps, one of the girls quickly caught up with us and addressed my father. "Brother, wait a moment." My father turned and she came closer, asking, "How much do you need?" My father, still in shock, couldn't speak, but the girl turned to me and asked, "Sweetheart, are you tired? Do you feel thirsty?" She took a doll out of her bag and handed it to me, saying, "Take this. It looks just like you. I just bought it for my sister from this shop. She looks just like you. So pretty." She smiled at me, and I immediately liked the doll. It was so beautiful, with a gentle face and light makeup. Holding it in my hands made me so happy. As I admired the doll, the girl took my hand and said casually, "Come, let me buy you some juice. I'm thirsty too." My father, already distressed, became even more so. Sensing his discomfort, the girl said, "Don't worry, brother. This little girl is just like my sister. Don't pay attention to what that shopkeeper said. Businessmen can be rude when they see no profit. Don't mind it, please. Don't be upset." Saying this, she took my hand and led us across the street to another store that sold juice and biscuits. She bought 5 bottles of juice, keeping 3 for herself and handing 2 to me and my father. "Here you go, brother. Actually, I don't have any brothers, but looking at you, I feel like you could be my brother. If I had a brother, he would be just like you." She smiled at me and asked, "Sweetheart, would you like some ice cream?" I shook my head, and my father reluctantly accepted the juice bottles. He handed one to me and sipped his slowly, his eyes still filled with tears. The girl, noticing this, said, "I can see that you're really struggling, and I can tell you're away from home. I overheard your conversation with the shopkeeper, and I believe everything you said was true." My father didn't respond, and she continued, "Although you may not consider me your sister, I see you as a brother now. So the money you need, I can give it to you." She took a 100 rupee note from her purse and handed it to my father. "For such a small amount, if you get a brother in return, it's not a bad deal," she said, almost as if she was the one doing us a favor. My father, who was already deeply troubled, became even more uncomfortable with her boldness. He was filled with the humiliation of the moment, and he didn't want to accept the money. He didn't even want the juice, but he had no choice. But I was really thirsty, and it was so hot. The stranger girl's insistence was filled with warmth and kindness. That's when my father reluctantly took the juice bottles. It was July, so he was probably thirsty too. The girl asked, "Brother, what's your name?" My father told her his name and address, but he didn't ask for hers, and neither did she offer it. His eyes reflected shame and regret. The girl reassured him, "Don't worry, sometimes in life such things happen. Don't be distressed. 100 rupees isn't a large amount." She handed him the 100 rupee note and said, "Goodbye. Take care, and maybe one day we will meet again." And the bus was due in about 45 minutes. Luckily, we managed to get our tickets and boarded the train. Thank God we made it home safely. My father was affected by this incident for many days, and I would often remember that beautiful stranger girl. For a long time, I kept the doll she had given me as a reminder of her. I thought to myself, if there are cruel people like the shopkeeper in this world, there are also kind people like her who make the world a better place. Her beautiful face remained etched in my heart, and even though many years passed, I imagined my father must have remembered her too. I thought, if only I could meet her again someday, I would give her a gift because she gave me one. Time passed, and our situation improved. We were now among the prosperous people, and we could easily repay the debt. But she had never made any contact with us. She didn't even leave her name. She probably didn't want us to repay her out of obligation. Back then, I was just a child, and I told my grandmother the whole story. She also wished that the angelic girl might come to meet us one day, but she never did. Time went on. I completed my master's and then got married. Fortunately, I was married into a wealthy family. I was happy, and my in-laws took great care of me. I prayed that my younger sister would also marry into a good family. Allah answered our prayers, and my mother-in-law asked for my sister's hand in marriage for her youngest son. My parents were delighted and accepted the proposal, as my in-laws had treated me like a flower. On the wedding day, there was a celebration at our house. Some wealthy guests were invited, and for them, a special dance and entertainment show was arranged. A famous dancer was hired for this special event. When the dancer arrived, my father, along with us, was standing near the entrance. As soon as my father saw the dancer stepping out of the car, he froze in shock. It was the same girl who had given him the 100 rupee note during a difficult time and had called him brother. Seeing her, my father's face turned pale. Along with her was an elderly woman and another girl who seemed like either her mother or sister. My father immediately moved away from the spot. My husband went up to him and asked, "Uncle, what happened? Did something upset you?" My father replied, "Yes, send this girl back. I don't support these kinds of gatherings." My husband was shocked and asked, "Why are you suddenly creating trouble at a happy event? We've arranged this special gathering for some important guests. Changing the program at the last moment could upset them." He tried to reason with my father and said, "This event is not for the general public, but we can't upset our special guests." My father firmly said, "I'm not going to sit there." Finally, my husband agreed and said, "Okay." My father didn't attend the event, and the wedding ended peacefully. The next day was the walima, wedding reception. After things calmed down, my husband said to me, "Your father is a strange man. I don't understand what happened to him on the wedding day. He had no objection when we mentioned a dance and entertainment program for the special guests. Thank God your sister's marriage was completed smoothly. Otherwise, he might have stopped the wedding." I then shared the entire story with him, how the dancer had called my father brother that day. They must have considered her as a sister in their heart, which is why they felt conflicted. After all, they had received 100 rupees from this girl in a moment of need. Little did they know that the person who helped them in their time of distress would turn out to be the daughter of a prostitute. That's why they didn't want to face her. After hearing my story, Salim fell into deep thought and said, "Yes, Sabiha, sometimes such coincidences happen that leave you stunned. Uncle must have always thought that if he ever met that girl, he would repay her kindness and call her his sister. Good times came, and the girl appeared, but at what moment? He couldn't call her sister, and he couldn't repay her kindness either. Still, one thing became clear. The people we sometimes look down upon may have the most beautiful hearts. She was our benefactor, and though she was the daughter of a prostitute, her heart was truly beautiful. If she hadn't helped us that day, we don't know what would have happened. My father probably also considered her a sister in his heart, which is why he couldn't see her as a dancer. And to this day, I have deep respect for my benefactor, because she helped us through our difficult time, and the doll she gave me is still with me. It always reminds me of that sweet girl.